Before her name became a symbol of resistance, Boudica was queen of the Iceni, a people living in eastern Britain under the shadow of Rome. Rome had invaded Britain in 43 CE, and by Boudica's time, much of the island was under imperial pressure. Some tribes had been conquered by force. Others, like the Iceni, lived as client kingdoms, allowed limited independence as long as they remained useful to Rome. But Roman friendship was never equal. Behind the language of alliance stood soldiers, taxes, debt, pride, and power. The Iceni could keep their king only while Rome allowed it. They could keep their land only while Rome respected its agreements. Boudica watched this world carefully. She saw Roman roads cutting across Britain. She saw forts rise where native power had once stood. She saw merchants, officials, soldiers, and tax collectors moving deeper into her people's lives. To Rome, Britain was a province to control. To Boudica, it was home. And soon that difference would become war. Boudica's husband, King Prasutagus, tried to protect his family and kingdom through politics. When he died, he left his lands jointly to his daughters and to the Roman Emperor Nero, hoping this arrangement would preserve the Iceni's position and protect his family from Roman greed. But Rome did not honor his plan. Instead, Roman officials treated the kingdom as conquered property. Lands were seized, nobles were humiliated, debts were demanded. The royal house was stripped of dignity. Then came the outrage that turned grief into rebellion. Ancient Roman writers record that Boudica was publicly flogged and her daughters were raped after the Romans ignored Prasutagus' will. This brutality became the spark that lit the revolt. For Boudica, the issue was no longer only land, it was justice. Rome had not merely taken wealth, it had attacked her family, her bloodline, her people, and her honor. And from that wound, a queen became a weapon. Rome expected fear. Instead, it created unity. Boudica began to gather those who had suffered under Roman rule. The Iceni were not alone. The Trinovantes and other Britons had their own anger, their own losses, their own reasons to rise. Roman colonists had taken land. Veterans had settled in native territory. Temples and taxes had become symbols of humiliation. Boudica's rebellion grew because it was larger than one woman's revenge. It became the anger of a people who felt their world being erased. Imagine her standing before warriors, families, elders, and young fighters. Her voice cutting through the wind, her hair bright like fire, her words simple, brutal, and unforgettable. Rome thinks we are broken, but today we show them that Britain still has a heart. The crowd answered not with quiet agreement, but with weapons raised toward the sky. For the first time in years, Rome's power in Britain trembled. The first great target was Camulodunum, modern Colchester. To Rome, it was a colony and a symbol of imperial control. To many Britons, it represented stolen land, veteran settlers, and Roman arrogance. There stood a great temple to Emperor Claudius, built at the expense of the local population and seen by the oppressed as a monument to domination. Boudica's army descended on the city with terrifying force. The Roman defenders were too few. The colony was not ready for a storm of rage this large. Streets filled with panic. Roman settlers ran toward the temple, hoping stone and imperial gods would protect them. But the rebellion had become fire. Camulodunum fell. The destruction shocked Roman Britain. The city that represented Roman power was burned by the very people Rome thought it had subdued. Even a Roman relief force from the 9th Legion suffered a devastating defeat while trying to intervene. Boudica had sent Rome a message. Britain was not conquered quietly. At first, Rome did not fully understand the scale of the danger. Governor Gaius Suetonius Paulinus was far away in the west, campaigning in Mona, now Anglesey, when the revolt exploded. Britain's Roman forces were stretched, communication was slow. By the time the truth reached the governor, the rebellion had already become a disaster. Boudica was not leading a small raid. She was leading an uprising capable of shaking Roman control of the province. Roman commanders had faced kings, tribes, and rebellions before. They understood war. But Boudica's revolt carried something especially dangerous: emotional fire. Her army was not fighting for pay, it was fighting for revenge, memory, family, and freedom. That kind of army can be terrifying. But Rome had one advantage Boudica could not ignore: discipline. The Roman army could be outnumbered and still remain deadly. Its soldiers were trained to hold formation, obey orders, and kill with terrifying efficiency. Soon rebellion would meet empire in open war. Boudica's army moved next toward Londinium, the growing Roman settlement that would one day become London. Suetonius reached the city, but he faced a terrible choice. Londinium was important, but he did not have enough men to defend it against Boudica's massive force. If he stayed, his army might be trapped and destroyed. So he made a ruthless military decision. He abandoned the city. Those who could leave followed the Roman army. Those who stayed faced the rebels. For the people of Londinium, the decision must have felt like betrayal. The empire that claimed to bring order could not protect them. Boudica entered with fury. Londinium burned. National Geographic describes Boudica's revolt as destroying major Roman settlements, including London, and shaking Rome's grip on Britain. The smoke over Londinium became a warning across the province. Boudica was no longer only resisting Rome, she was tearing its cities from the ground. After Camulodunum and Londinium, the rebellion moved toward Verulamium near modern St. Albans. By now, Rome understood the scale of the catastrophe. Boudica's forces had destroyed major settlements and killed many Romans and Roman allies. Ancient sources give huge numbers for the dead, with Britannica noting that her forces massacred about 70,000 Romans and supporters, though ancient casualty figures can be difficult to verify precisely. But the emotional meaning was clear. The province was burning. To Boudica's followers, every destroyed Roman settlement may have felt like justice. To Rome, it was rebellion beyond tolerance. The empire could lose men, it could lose towns, but it could not allow the idea that Roman power could be humiliated by a native queen. The war was becoming absolute. Boudica had won terrifying victories, but each victory pushed Rome toward a final response, and when Rome finally concentrated its force, mercy would not be part of the plan. Suetonius knew he could not defeat Boudica in a wide-open field where her numbers could surround him, so he chose the ground carefully. According to the Roman account, he placed his smaller army in a narrow position with woodland behind them, forcing Boudica's larger force to attack from the front. This reduced the advantage of numbers and gave Roman discipline a chance to survive. Boudica's army arrived full of confidence. Behind the warriors, families reportedly watched from wagons, expecting victory. They had seen Roman cities burn. They had seen fear spread through the province. Why should this battle be different? Before the fight, Boudica was remembered as riding in a chariot and urging her people to choose freedom over slavery. The Roman soldiers stood silent, shields tight, weapons ready. One side had numbers, fury, and memory. The other had formation, discipline, and steel. The fate of Roman Britain was about to be decided. When the battle began, Boudica's warriors surged forward like a human storm, but the Roman line did not break. The legionaries waited, then threw their javelins into the advancing crowd. When the Britons came closer, the Romans moved forward in disciplined wedge formations, cutting through the mass with brutal efficiency. Boudica's greatest strength became a weakness. Her army was huge but difficult to control. The narrow ground trapped its numbers. The wagons behind them meant to witness victory became obstacles when the tide turned. Panic spread. The Roman machine pushed forward. What had begun as a rebellion of fire became a slaughter. Britannica identifies the final Roman victory at the Battle of Watling Street, where Suetonius defeated Boudica's forces. Boudica had made Rome tremble, but on that battlefield, Rome survived. And the dream of driving the empire from Britain collapsed beneath Roman steel. Boudica did not win, but Rome never forgot her. After the defeat, ancient sources differ on how she died. Some say she took poison, others suggest she died of illness. Her burial place remains unknown, and historians still debate parts of her story. But her legend survived because she became more than a defeated rebel. She became a symbol, a queen who rose after humiliation, a mother who turned grief into war, a leader who united tribes against the most powerful empire of her age. Rome kept Britain, but Boudica left a wound in Roman memory. Her revolt showed that conquest could never fully silence the conquered. It showed that empire creates enemies when it confuses power with justice. Centuries later, her name would return as a symbol of resistance, courage, and national memory. Boudica's rebellion ended in defeat. But history does not remember only those who win. Sometimes it remembers those who dare to stand when kneeling would have been